Walter Carter had waited 35 years for this moment. His hand didn't tremble as he signed his name on the dotted line. The salesman smiled wide and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. She's all yours." Outside, the Arizona sun bounced off the cream and bronze body of a new Winnebago trailer. Walter ran his fingers along its side, the heat of the metal warming his palm. $45,000 from his retirement fund, every cent earned by selling insurance policies and saving small. "The Grand Canyon first," he whispered. "Then Yellowstone. Maybe Montana before the snow." Inside the trailer, everything smelled new. Fresh wood, vinyl seats, and untouched freedom. He opened every cabinet door like a boy exploring treasure. The sink shined, the fridge hummed, the steering wheel fit his grip perfectly. For years, he'd sat behind a desk watching other people plan vacations. Now it was his turn. He could almost see himself parked under the stars, coffee steaming, no deadlines, no clients, just peace. His wife would have loved it, he thought. "You finally did it, Walter," he said softly, smiling at his reflection in the windshield. He took out his phone and stared at the picture of his daughter, Betty, smiling with her 2 kids. She had been asking for months, "Dad, when are you going to relax? Find a hobby or something?" Well, this was better than a hobby. It was life. He pressed call. "Hey, Betty," he said when she answered. "I finally bought it. The Winnebago Vista. You should see it. I'm going to travel across the country." There was silence on the line, long enough to sting. "How much did it cost?" she finally asked. $45,000, Walter replied, still cheerful. "It's a solid investment, sweetheart." But her voice turned sharp. "Dad, that's too much. You could have used that money for something wiser." He blinked. "Something wiser? Betty, I've worked my whole life for this. I deserve to enjoy it." She sighed. "I have to go. I just got home. We'll talk later." The call ended before he could respond. Walter stood there holding his phone, staring at the call duration. 2 minutes, 38 seconds. That was all his dream got. He climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred, steady and proud, but inside him something deflated. "Wiser," he murmured. The word tasted bitter. He drove home through Scottsdale traffic, the sunlight glaring through his windshield. When he parked in his driveway, the house looked emptier than usual. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and silence. He made a sandwich and sat inside the trailer, maps spread across the small table. "Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Montana," he whispered again. But his daughter's voice kept echoing in his head. That night, Walter sat in his living room, staring at the trailer through the window. Its bronze body gleamed under the porch light, but he couldn't shake Betty's tone from his mind. More wisely. The words rolled around his thoughts like gravel. He tried to distract himself, turned on the television, made tea, but silence pressed in. He thought of his wife again, how she used to smile when he talked about traveling after retirement. "You'll see the country one day," she had said. He wished she was there to see it now. By morning, coffee brewed in the kitchen, but it tasted wrong. The bitterness clung to his tongue as if it carried yesterday's disappointment. He looked through the window. Sunlight hit the trailer's side, making it glow like a dream he was trying to defend. That's when he heard it. A car engine outside. Not the mail truck. A black Lexus pulled to the curb. His son-in-law, Zachary, stepped out with purpose in his walk. Walter frowned. There had been no call, no text, no warning. Zachary didn't knock. He pushed the door open and walked straight into the house like he owned it. "Morning, Mr. Carter," he said flatly, not even pretending to smile. "We talked it over. My family needs the trailer for our vacation. We'll take it for 2 weeks." Walter froze, dish towel still in his hand. "You'll take it. I just bought it yesterday, Zachary." But his son-in-law kept talking, scanning the counter until his eyes landed on the key ring beside the coffee maker. The Winnebago key dangled temptingly. "Betty told me it cost $45,000, Zachary said, lifting the key as if inspecting fruit at a market. That's a lot for something you won't use much anyway. Walter's chest tightened. Not use. I bought it to travel. That's the point. Zachary chuckled, already walking toward the door. At your age. Come on, you don't need this. We can drop you off at a senior home on our way out if that helps. The words hit him like a slap. Walter stepped forward, trembling with disbelief. You can't just take my property. But Zachary didn't even glance back. We're family, he said over his shoulder. We borrow things. Then the door shut, and the Lexus drove away, leaving a stunned silence behind. Walter stood by the window, his reflection pale in the glass, watching the car disappear around the corner. His hand clenched around the empty air where the keys had been. Slowly he turned the lock on his front door, something he rarely did, and whispered to himself, You think I'm too old to fight back? Let's see. Walter moved through his quiet house like a man tracing memories. Every room whispered of his wife's laughter, of years when family meant something warmer than power or greed. He walked to his bedroom and opened the top drawer of his dresser. Inside lay old watches, spare batteries, and a small metal ring. His spare trailer keys. He held them up, their shine catching the morning light. You forgot, Zachary, he murmured. I was in insurance for 35 years. I always keep a backup plan. He sat at his desk, the spare keys resting in his palm, and began pulling folders from the cabinet. Contracts, property deeds, insurance policies, everything neatly labeled and documented. Each paper was a record of his discipline, his care, his lifetime of doing things right. He stared at his will, last updated 3 years ago after his wife's passing. Everything went to Betty. Everything. He ran his thumb over her name and whispered, Maybe it's time that changes. By midnight, his desk was covered in files. He had reread every clause, every document, and every signature. His eyes burned, but his focus stayed sharp. The bedside clock crept past 2 a.m., then 4 o'clock, then 6 o'clock. As dawn broke, Walter poured himself coffee and stared out the window. The trailer still sat in his driveway, untouched for now. Tomorrow, he muttered. They'll come tomorrow. He took a slow sip, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. At 7:30, he dialed a number from memory. Margaret Sullivan, attorney at law. Came a familiar voice. Walter straightened his back. Margaret, it's Walter Carter. I need to change my will. Urgently. She hesitated. Mr. Carter, I'm fully booked today. He replied calmly. I'll pay double your hourly rate. This can't wait. There was silence for a moment. Then she said, Be here by 2 o'clock. Walter smiled faintly. I'll be there. He dressed in his old gray business suit, pressed white shirt, and navy tie, the same outfit he'd worn for decades when making decisions that mattered. Driving into Phoenix, he felt strangely alive. Margaret's office was sleek, glass walls and calm colors. When she saw him, she smiled. You want to change your will? She asked. Yes, he said. Everything goes to the Veterans Assistance Fund of Arizona. Betty gets $1. Write it exactly like that. She studied him carefully. Are you sure? More than ever. 3 hours later, the documents were ready. 2 witnesses signed. Walter's pen moved smoothly, his signature firm and deliberate. No hesitation. I'll keep the original on file, Margaret said. These copies are yours. Walter nodded. Thank you, Margaret. He left her office with the folder under his arm and the desert sun in his eyes. The Winnebago was waiting when he got home, its bronze sides gleaming like defiance. He walked straight inside the trailer and opened the glove compartment. He placed one signed copy of his new will inside, not hidden, right on top where anyone would see it. Then he locked the door gently and stepped back. You wanted a vacation, he whispered. Enjoy it. That night he made coffee, turned on the lamp, and waited by the window. They would come early, ready to take what they thought belonged to them. He smiled at the thought. He'd spent a lifetime teaching others to prepare for loss. Now he'd turned preparation into power. At 8:15 the next morning, the black Lexus returned. Behind it came a silver SUV. Betty stepped out first, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Zachary followed, confident as ever, and their 2 children jumped out of the back, laughing and excited. Walter stood by the window, watching as they loaded the trailer. Coolers, suitcases, folding chairs. They didn't even knock. To them, he was invisible, just part of the background. "Thanks for the trailer, Mr. Carter." Zachary shouted toward the house, smirking. "We'll take good care of it." Betty tugged his arm. "Zachary, stop." But he just laughed. "What? He's not even coming out." Walter didn't move from the window. He watched as they climbed into the trailer, started the engine, and drove off. The sound faded into the distance, leaving his driveway empty. He looked at the clock. 8:27 a.m. He made himself another coffee and sat down, calm and patient. At 10:27, exactly 2 hours later, he picked up his phone and typed 4 words. "Check the glove compartment." He pressed send and set the phone on the table. 3 minutes later it buzzed. Zachary calling. Then again. Then again. Walter didn't answer. 10 calls turned to 30. 30 turned to 60. By 10:45, his screen showed 80 missed calls and dozens of messages. He played one voicemail. Zachary's voice shook with panic. "What the hell is this, Walter? Call me back now." Then Betty's voice breaking. "Dad, please. We need to talk." Walter smiled softly and typed one last message. "This is only the beginning." The phone buzzed non-stop, vibrating across the table like an angry insect. Walter turned it face down and let it ring. Outside, the sun climbed higher, warm light filling the kitchen. He poured himself another cup of coffee and took a slow sip. Somewhere on Interstate 10, his son-in-law was learning what fear felt like. Betty would be reading the new will out loud, her voice cracking. The kids would ask what was wrong. Walter leaned back in his chair and whispered, "Actions have consequences, Zachary." He stood, walked to his office, and opened a drawer. Inside lay a manila folder already prepared. Purchase receipts, insurance papers, title documents, and photos of the trailer's VIN plate. Every page neatly labeled, every date clear. At 7:30 that morning, before he'd even sent the message, Walter had called the Scottsdale Police Department's non-emergency line. "I'd like to report a stolen vehicle," he'd told them. The officer had asked for proof. Walter smiled then and said, "I've got plenty of that." Now with his evidence ready, he checked the time. 8:15 the next morning. His appointment with Officer Martinez. He dressed in the same gray suit, knotted his navy tie, and combed his silver hair carefully. Presentation mattered. When he arrived at the police station, the cool air greeted him like order itself. A young officer at the desk looked up. "Good morning, sir. How can we help you?" Walter placed the folder on the counter. "I'm here to report my Winnebago trailer stolen by my son-in-law." The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Family dispute?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd heard this before. Walter simply nodded. "Perhaps, but it's still theft. I have every document to prove ownership." The officer flipped through the folder. Purchase receipt, title, registration, insurance, all in Walter's name alone. His expression changed from skeptical to serious. "You're well prepared, Mr. Carter." Walter nodded. 35 years in insurance. "I believe in paperwork." The officer smiled faintly. "We'll log it as a felony vehicle theft." Walter gave them Zachary's full name, description, and the likely travel route. "Interstate 10 westbound, heading toward California," he explained. The officer typed steadily, asking short, precise questions. "Did you give permission to use the vehicle?" "No," Walter said firmly. "He took the keys against my wishes." By the time he left the station, a police report had been filed and entered into the system. Highway patrol would be notified within the hour. Walter stepped back into the sunlight, feeling lighter than he had in days. At noon his phone rang. Officer Martinez's calm voice filled the line. "Mr. Carter, the Highway Patrol located your vehicle about 70 miles west of Phoenix. The operator has been informed of the theft report. He's returning the trailer now." Walter felt a small, cold satisfaction. "Was there any trouble?" he asked. "Some resistance at first," the officer replied. "But once he saw the documents, he understood his options." Walter thanked him politely and ended the call. He poured himself another coffee. "Perfect," he murmured. 2 hours later, a Winnebago and a black Lexus appeared at the end of his street. The trailer rolled slowly into his driveway, followed closely by the car. Walter watched from his window. The engine stopped, and for 30 long seconds no one moved. Then the trailer door slammed. Zachary climbed out, face red with fury. Betty followed, her eyes puffy from crying. Their children stayed in the car, pressed to the windows. Walter walked to the front door and stepped outside, his posture calm and controlled. "You humiliated us," Zachary shouted from the driveway. "The police stopped us like criminals, in front of my kids." Walter didn't raise his voice. "You took what wasn't yours. That's theft." Zachary's jaw clenched. "We're family. You don't call the cops on family." Walter's tone stayed steady. "Family doesn't steal from each other." Betty cried softly behind him, whispering, "Please, Dad, the children are scared." Walter looked directly at her. "Good. Maybe they'll remember what honesty looks like." Zachary stepped closer, fists tight. "You think you're clever, changing your will like some old fool? We'll fight it. We'll have you declared incompetent. You're losing your mind." Walter didn't blink. "I'm thinking clearer than ever. Now hand me my keys." Zachary's hand shook as he pulled the key ring from his pocket. For a moment, Walter saw the struggle in his eyes, pride against fear. Finally, Zachary dropped the keys into Walter's open palm. The metal was warm, pulsing with defeat. Walter turned and walked back to his door without another word. He locked it behind him and stood quietly in the hallway, listening to the sound of the Lexus pulling away. The trailer sat outside, restored to its place, but something had shifted inside him. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about dignity. He poured out his cold coffee, rinsed the cup, and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow they'll make their next move. And I'll be ready." The war had only just begun. The next morning, Walter was drinking coffee on his patio when the doorbell rang. A courier stood there with a cream envelope marked Whitman and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Walter thanked him, signed, and shut the door. Inside, he broke the seal and began to read. The words were sharp and cold. Petition for determination of incapacity. His daughter and son-in-law claimed he was unfit to manage his finances, that he was losing his mind, and needed court supervision. Walter smiled faintly. So this is how low they'll go. He picked up his phone and called Margaret Sullivan. "They've filed it," he said. She replied without surprise. "I thought they might. They're trying to paint you as unstable." Walter's voice was steady. "Then we'll show them what stability looks like." Margaret's tone sharpened. "I'll draft our counter. You'll need medical proof of competency. 2 evaluations, full documentation." Walter nodded. "Already scheduled." He hung up and poured himself another cup of coffee, the calm of a man who'd seen storms before. Over the next week, he visited 2 doctors. Both ran full examinations, neurological tests, memory checks, logic puzzles, handwriting assessments. Each time, Walter finished with perfect results. One doctor smiled and said, "Mr. Carter, your cognitive function is excellent. You're sharper than most 50-year-olds." Walter chuckled softly. "Thank you, doctor. Let's make sure the court hears that." Both doctors signed sealed reports confirming his sound mind and judgment. The documents were thick, official, and devastating to his accusers. At Margaret's office, He placed the medical reports on her desk. "These should bury their case," she said, flipping through the pages. "Now we file a restraining order to stop them from stepping foot on your property." Walter nodded. "Do it." Her brow furrowed. "You realize this ends your relationship with them permanently." He looked out the window, his voice low but firm. "That relationship ended the day they tried to steal from me. This just makes it legal." Margaret nodded slowly. "Then let's finish this right." 3 weeks later, the hearing took place in a small courtroom downtown. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, listened patiently as both sides presented their case. Margaret laid down documents, medical reports, and years of financial records showing Walter's steady, responsible life. The opposing lawyer tried to argue he was emotionally unstable, but the judge interrupted. "Changing one's will is not evidence of insanity. It's evidence of free will." Her gavel struck once. Petition denied. Mr. Carter remains legally competent. Outside the courthouse, Betty stood pale and trembling. Zachary's jaw was tight with anger. Walter adjusted his tie and looked at them both. "You wanted to prove I was crazy," he said quietly. "Now the whole court knows who the real fools are." Zachary stepped forward, but Betty pulled his arm back. Tears filled her eyes. "Dad, please. We never wanted it to go this far." Walter's gaze was calm but final. "Every choice has a price, sweetheart. You made yours." Then he walked away without looking back. A week later, Walter sat in Margaret's office again. She laid a document on the table, the revocation of the house deed. "You gave the house to your daughter 3 years ago," she said. "We're taking it back for gross ingratitude." Walter studied the paper. "Do it." Margaret added 3 insurance forms. These policies totaled $250,000. She's still listed as beneficiary. Walter signed each page carefully. "Not anymore," he said. "Everything goes to the Veterans Assistance Fund." By the next morning, certified letters had been sent, one to Betty, one to Zachary, and one to their lawyer. When Walter's phone rang hours later, he ignored it. Margaret called soon after. "They're furious," she said. "Threats, shouting, everything. But legally it's over. The house is yours again, and the will stands." Walter leaned back in his chair. "Good. Then I can finally move on." That afternoon, a realtor planted a for sale sign in his front yard. The same house he once built for love now stood as a lesson in betrayal. Within a week, the house sold for nearly $400,000, cash. Walter bought a smaller one in Sedona, 2 bedrooms, red mountain views, and quiet air. He packed carefully, using the trailer for its true purpose this time. No lawyers, no drama, no noise. Just him, the open road, and peace. When everything was ready, he stood in the empty living room one last time and whispered, "You took my trust, but not my strength." Then he locked the door and never looked back. The morning sun glowed across the Arizona desert as Walter's trailer rolled north. He stopped at a scenic overlook, stepped out, and gazed at the Grand Canyon stretching endlessly before him. He lifted his phone, took a single picture, the Winnebago beside the cliff, sunlight washing over it, and sent it to Betty with one caption, "Turns out I did need this after all." Then he smiled, set his phone to airplane mode, and drove off into the open road. Free. And finally at peace.